Why does discipline feel like punishment, even when you know it's the key to everything you want? You set goals. You understand what needs to be done. And yet, every morning feels like a negotiation with your own mind. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You're not lazy. You're not broken. Your brain is simply wired to avoid pain and chase comfort. Marcus Aurelius understood this centuries ago. He didn't rely on motivation. He trained perception. He knew that the mind doesn't resist discipline itself. It resists how discipline is framed. What if discipline didn't feel like force, but like alignment? What if your brain didn't fight structure, but craved it? Today, you'll learn how Stoic philosophy quietly reprograms the mind, so discipline stops feeling like suffering and starts feeling natural. Not through hype, not through willpower, but through timeless psychological leverage. Stay with me, and comment this below to lock it in. Discipline is my ally. 1. Stop treating discipline like punishment. Most people don't fail at discipline because they lack willpower. They fail because, unconsciously, they've trained their brain to hate it. Think about the language you use. I have to wake up early. I have to work out. I have to stay consistent. Every one of those phrases frames discipline as a loss, a sacrifice, a form of punishment you endure today so you can maybe feel good tomorrow. And your brain is very simple in this regard. It avoids what feels like pain and repeats what feels rewarding. This is why discipline feels heavy before you even start. Your mind isn't resisting the action, it's resisting the meaning you've attached to it. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius never described his duties as burdens forced upon him by fate. He saw them as expressions of who he was. In his Meditations, he reminds himself that he was born for effort, not comfort, not as self-criticism, but as clarity. When discipline is framed as punishment, your brain activates avoidance. When discipline is framed as identity, your brain activates protection. This is a critical shift. Your mind will argue endlessly against pain, but it will defend identity at all costs. A man who says, "I'm trying to work out," negotiates with himself every morning. A man who says, "I don't skip training," doesn't negotiate. He acts. The Stoic move here is not forcing yourself harder. It's changing the internal story from doing something unpleasant to being someone consistent. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This isn't poetic motivation. It's psychological instruction. The obstacle, discipline, stops being the enemy when it becomes the proof that you are living in alignment with your values. Modern life trains us to associate pleasure with ease and pain with effort. The Stoics flipped this association. Effort became meaningful. Discomfort became confirmation. Discipline became a form of self-respect. Here's the practical reframe you need to install. Stop telling yourself, "I have to do this." Start telling yourself, "This is what someone like me does." That single sentence changes how your brain categorizes the task. When you say, "I have to," your brain hears coercion. When you say, "I am the type of man who," your brain hears consistency, and consistency feels safe. This is why identity-based discipline works when motivation fails. Motivation is emotional and temporary. Identity is stable. Your brain doesn't need to feel inspired to protect who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who trains, reading one more page, showing up on time and doing the work stops feeling like effort. It feels like maintenance, like brushing your teeth, like locking your door at night. This is exactly how discipline becomes lighter without becoming weaker. Here's a simple Stoic exercise to apply today. Pick one disciplined action you've been resisting. Gym, writing, waking up early, studying. Now remove the emotional language around it. Instead of, I need motivation to do this. Say, this is part of who I am. There's nothing to decide. Then do it without drama, without build-up, without internal debate. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because you're expressing yourself. That's the shift most people miss. Discipline isn't something you do to yourself. It's something you do as yourself. And once your brain understands that, resistance drops dramatically. Because what you label as punishment, your brain will avoid. But what you label as identity, your brain will protect. And that's when discipline stops feeling like suffering and starts feeling natural. 2. Make discipline the shortest path to pleasure. Your brain doesn't hate discipline. It hates waiting. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think the mind is lazy, undisciplined, or broken. In reality, the brain is extremely efficient. It is constantly scanning one question: where is the fastest reward? Modern life answers that question instantly. Your phone, sugar, scrolling, comfort. Each of these delivers a small hit of pleasure with almost no effort. Discipline, on the other hand, often promises a reward in the distant future: better health, more confidence, long-term success. To the brain, that delay feels like risk, and the brain avoids risk. This is why discipline collapses the moment willpower fades. You're asking your mind to walk uphill with no visible payoff. The Stoics never made this mistake. They understood that human behavior is shaped not by ideals, but by incentives. Epictetus warned that a man who cannot govern pleasure becomes its servant. Not because pleasure is evil, but because it has been misaligned. The solution is not to eliminate pleasure. The solution is to reroute it. If pleasure follows distraction, distraction wins. If pleasure follows discipline, discipline becomes attractive. This is the psychological lever you must pull. You don't need massive rewards. Your brain responds powerfully to small, immediate signals. A short walk in the sun, a favorite coffee, music you enjoy, a moment of stillness. These are not indulgences. They are reinforcements. The mistake people make is rewarding themselves randomly. The Stoic approach is precise. Pleasure must be earned, and it must be attached to disciplined action. Train, then enjoy something simple. Finish your work, then step outside. Complete the task, then rest without guilt. Over time, your brain learns a new pattern: discipline, reward, calm, identity reinforcement. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery doesn't come from denial alone. It comes from intelligent structure. When your mind knows that discipline leads to relief instead of endless strain, resistance weakens. This also explains why people who rely on delayed gratification alone eventually burn out. They're always paying the cost up front and never collecting along the way. The brain rebels against that imbalance. The Stoics balanced effort with restoration. They worked intensely, then withdrew intentionally, not to escape responsibility, but to recover strength. Here's how to apply this immediately. Choose one disciplined action you do daily. Attach a small, clean pleasure to it. Not before, not randomly, after. And keep that pairing consistent. You are not bribing yourself. You are training your nervous system. When discipline becomes the fastest route to a good feeling, even a subtle one, your brain stops fighting it. It starts anticipating it. That's the turning point. Discipline fails when pleasure is elsewhere. Discipline sticks when pleasure is aligned. Your brain doesn't reject discipline because it's hard. It rejects it because it sees no immediate benefit. Give it one. And discipline stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like the smartest choice available. 3. Shrink the task until resistance disappears. Your brain is not overwhelmed by effort. It is overwhelmed by scale. Most people sabotage their own discipline before they even begin by making the task feel enormous. A full workout, a complete plan, an hour of focus, a perfect routine. The moment your brain detects something that feels too big, it activates resistance. Not because you can't do it, but because it senses risk and fatigue. The Stoics avoided this trap by focusing on what was required right now, not on the total distance ahead. Seneca wrote that life feels short, not because we lack time, but because we waste much of it, worrying about what lies far ahead. The mind collapses under imagined weight long before the body ever moves. This is why discipline becomes lighter the moment the task becomes smaller. Your brain is comfortable with beginnings. It fears commitment to magnitude. When you tell yourself, "I'm going to work out for an hour," your brain hears loss of energy, loss of comfort, and loss of freedom. When you tell yourself, "I'll do 5 minutes," resistance nearly vanishes. And here's the crucial insight. Starting is the discipline. Once you begin, momentum takes over. Dopamine is released not from completion, but from progress. Action creates its own motivation. The Stoics understood this intuitively. Virtue was not a grand gesture. It was the right action performed repeatedly in small moments. Think about how resistance actually feels. It doesn't feel like physical pain. It feels like hesitation, mental friction, delay. That friction disappears the instant action begins. So the Stoic strategy is simple but precise. Make discipline so small that your brain doesn't bother fighting it. Read 1 page, do 1 push-up, write 1 sentence, stand up and stretch. These actions feel insignificant, but they carry enormous psychological leverage. They bypass negotiation. Once you're moving, stopping feels harder than continuing. This is why the most disciplined people don't rely on motivation or heroic effort. They rely on minimums, non-negotiable, laughably small actions that keep identity intact. Missing a day feels like a break in who they are, not just in what they do. Seneca warned against waiting for ideal conditions. There is no perfect moment to act. There is only the present decision. Discipline lives there, not in plans or future versions of yourself. Here's how to apply this today. Take the habit you've been avoiding. Lower the requirement until it feels almost too easy. Commit only to starting, not finishing, not excelling. Starting. Tell yourself, "I'll stop after 5 minutes if I want." Most of the time you won't, but even if you do, discipline still wins. Because consistency isn't built by intensity, it's built by showing up. Your brain learns something critical in these moments. Action is safe. Action is manageable. Action does not drain me. And once your brain accepts that, resistance fades. Discipline does not begin with strength. It begins with removal of fear. Make the task small enough and your brain will let you pass. That's when discipline becomes effortless. Not because the work vanished, but because the resistance did. 4. Use discomfort as proof you're becoming stronger. Most people interpret discomfort as a warning. The Stoics interpreted it as information. Modern culture teaches you to avoid anything that feels unpleasant. The moment something becomes hard, awkward, or uncomfortable, you're encouraged to step away, distract yourself, or seek relief. Over time, your brain learns a dangerous association. Discomfort equals danger. The Stoics reversed this association completely. To them, discomfort was not harm. It was training. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." This wasn't denial, it was perception. He understood that pain is often magnified not by the experience itself, but by the meaning we assign to it. When discipline creates discomfort, your brain asks, "Should I stop?" The Stoic answer is different. Good. This means the training is working. This reframing changes everything. Discomfort becomes a signal of progress, not a reason to retreat. The body strains, the mind resists. But instead of interpreting that resistance as a threat, You recognize it as proof that you are stepping beyond your previous limits. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort on purpose. Seneca slept on the floor, wore simple clothes, and ate plain food, not to suffer, but to train resilience. He wanted his nervous system to learn that discomfort was survivable, temporary, and ultimately harmless. Modern discipline works the same way. Cold showers, early mornings, hard conversations, finishing the task when you'd rather quit. Each moment of controlled discomfort teaches your brain a powerful lesson. I can handle this. Once your brain accepts that, fear loses its leverage. This is why disciplined people don't rely on comfort to feel safe. They rely on competence. They know discomfort doesn't break them. Avoidance does. Here's the Stoic ritual that rewires this association. The moment discomfort appears, don't rush to escape it. Pause. Breathe. Then mentally label it. Not as pain, not as suffering, but as training. Say it internally. This is proof I'm getting stronger. That sentence alone shifts the emotional response. Your nervous system calms, your posture changes. The task no longer feels like an attack. It feels like a challenge you are meant to meet. Over time, your brain begins to crave this signal. Discomfort becomes familiar, predictable, even welcome. Not because it's pleasant, but because it represents growth. This is where most people quit, right at the edge where strength is being built. The Stoic stays, not out of stubbornness, but out of understanding. They know something most people don't. Discomfort is not the enemy of discipline. It is the evidence of it. When you stop interpreting discomfort as danger, your brain stops panicking. Resistance drops. Focus sharpens. And discipline becomes less about forcing yourself forward and more about recognizing that you are exactly where you should be. The work doesn't get easier, you get stronger, and your brain learns to respect that. 5. Remove choice, not motivation. Your brain doesn't collapse under hard work. It collapses under decision fatigue. Every time you ask yourself, do I feel like doing this today? You drain mental energy before the work even begins. By the time you decide, you're already tired. This is why discipline feels exhausting to people who rely on motivation. They are forcing their brain to renegotiate the same decision every single day. The Stoics avoided this trap by removing choice wherever possible. Epictetus was clear about this. First decide who you are, then act accordingly. Not based on mood, not based on convenience, based on principle. Once a principle is set, debate ends. This is the foundation of a faultless discipline. When something is optional, your brain will argue. When something is fixed, your brain complies. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up and debate whether you feel motivated enough. There is no internal conversation. The action happens because the decision was made long ago. Discipline works the same way when it's structured correctly. Most people wait for motivation to appear. The Stoic builds a structure so motivation is irrelevant. Fixed time, fixed place, fixed behavior. 6 in the morning means training. After lunch means focused work. Before bed means reflection. No negotiation. No emotional vote. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be a writer, write. Not when you feel inspired. Not when conditions are perfect. Simply write." This wasn't harshness. It was mercy. Removing choice removes friction. Your brain is relieved when it no longer has to decide. This is also why routines feel restrictive at first and freeing later. At the beginning, your mind resists losing options. Over time, it realizes something important. Fewer decisions mean more energy. Freedom is not unlimited choice. Freedom is reduced in a conflict. Here's how to apply this Stoic principle immediately. Choose one discipline that matters most right now. Assign it a fixed time and place. Commit to showing up regardless of mood. No tracking motivation, no checking feelings, no asking permission from your emotions. If you catch yourself negotiating, stop and return to the rule. This is simply what happens at this time. Once the rule exists, your brain adapts quickly. Resistance fades because there is nothing left to argue with. The action becomes automatic, predictable, calm. This is when discipline stops feeling heavy. You're no longer pushing against yourself. You're moving along a path that's already been cleared. Motivation comes and goes. Structure stays. And when structure is in place, discipline becomes quiet, reliable, and surprisingly light. Because the hardest part was never the work. It was the decision to begin over and over again. Remove that decision, and discipline finally has room to breathe. 6. Identity. Lock. Become the type of man who is disciplined. Your brain does not obey goals, it obeys identity. This is the final lever that makes discipline stick when everything else fades. Goals live in the future. Identity lives in the present, and the brain will always prioritize protecting who you believe you are over chasing what you merely want. This is why people can abandon goals easily, but struggle to violate their self-image. A man who wants to be disciplined negotiates. A man who is disciplined acts. Marcus Aurelius understood this distinction with brutal clarity. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He wasn't encouraging motivation. He was collapsing identity and action into a single moment. When discipline becomes part of who you are, your brain stops asking if you'll act. It only asks how. This is what identity lock does. It removes friction at the deepest level. Most people treat discipline as a temporary behavior they perform until they reach a goal. The Stoic treats discipline as a permanent character trait, something non-negotiable, something to be maintained, not forced. Your brain is wired to defend consistency. When your actions match your identity, the nervous system feels stable. When they don't, it creates discomfort. This is why disciplined people feel uneasy when they skip routines. Not because they fear punishment, but because inconsistency feels wrong. This is the state you want to reach. Here's how to install identity lock. First, stop saying, "I'm trying to be disciplined." That phrase tells your brain this behavior is optional. Replace it with a simple, factual statement. "I don't skip training. I do the work even when I don't feel like it. I keep promises to myself." These are not affirmations. They are identity statements. Short, specific, action-based. Next, prove the identity in small ways. Identity is not formed by declarations. It is formed by evidence. Each time you act in alignment, your brain updates its self-image. One workout was completed when it was inconvenient. One task finished without negotiation. One morning, you showed up anyway. Each action deposits credibility into your identity account. Over time, your brain stops questioning discipline because questioning it would threaten who you believe you are. And the brain avoids that at all costs. This is why willpower-based discipline eventually collapses. It relies on force. Identity-based discipline relies on alignment. When you act in alignment with your identity, discipline feels calm, almost boring. There is no inner drama, no hype, just quiet execution, and that is the Stoic ideal. Not intensity, not obsession, but steadiness. Once identity lock is in place, discipline no longer feels like something you do. It feels like something you maintain. And your brain, finally understanding who you are, stops resisting and starts cooperating. 7. The 7-day Stoic discipline. Reset understanding discipline is not enough. Your brain changes through repetition, not insight. The Stoics didn't rely on sudden transformation. They relied on daily training. small, controlled repetitions that slowly rewired the mind. This final section turns everything you've learned into a short reset, simple enough to follow, powerful enough to change how discipline feels permanently. This is not a challenge, it's a realignment. Day 1. Shrink the task. Choose one discipline you've been avoiding. Make it embarrassingly small. 5 minutes, 1 page, 1 set. The goal is not progress. The goal is removing fear. Your brain learns. Action is safe. Day 2. Fix the time. Do the same task at the same time. No flexibility, no debate. When the clock hits that moment, action begins automatically. Your brain relaxes when decisions disappear. Day 3. Attach a reward. Immediately after completing the task, give yourself a clean, simple reward. Not junk, not distraction, something calming, something grounding. Your brain begins associating discipline with relief instead of strain. Day 4. Add voluntary discomfort. Introduce one small discomfort on purpose. Cold water on your face. Standing instead of sitting. Finishing the last rep slowly. Discomfort is no longer a threat, it's proof. Day 5. Declare identity. Write one sentence and keep it visible. I am the kind of man who keeps promises to himself. Then prove it once that day, quietly. Identity begins forming through evidence. Day 6. Remove negotiation. If the thought, "should I," appears, end the conversation. This is what happens now. Your brain adapts faster than you think. Day 7. Review without judgment. Ask 3 questions. What felt easier than expected? Where did resistance drop? What identity did I reinforce? No criticism, only observation. By the end of these 7 days, discipline won't feel exciting. It will feel normal. And that's the real victory. Because the goal of Stoic discipline is not intensity, it's reliability. When discipline feels ordinary, your brain no longer fights it. It accepts it. And once acceptance is there, discipline stops being something you chase and becomes something you live. For most of your life, discipline probably felt like a burden, something you had to force, something that demanded constant motivation, constant pressure, constant self-control. But now you can see the truth more clearly. Discipline was never the enemy. The way it was framed was. Your brain isn't flawed. It isn't lazy. It isn't working against you. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Avoid pain, conserve energy, and protect identity. When discipline felt like punishment, your mind resisted. When it felt like endless delay with no reward, your mind rebelled. When it felt optional, your mind negotiated its way out. Stoic philosophy doesn't ask you to fight your nature. It teaches you to work with it. You learned that discipline becomes lighter when it's tied to identity instead of effort. That resistance fades when tasks are small enough to feel safe. That pleasure doesn't need to be eliminated, only redirected. That discomfort isn't danger, but evidence of growth. And that structure outperforms motivation every single time. This is why the Stoics were so calm under pressure. They didn't rely on emotion to do what mattered. They built systems that made the right action the easiest action. They didn't chase discipline. They arranged their lives so discipline felt natural. The goal was never to become harsh or rigid. The goal was to become reliable. Reliable to your values. Reliable to your word. Reliable to the man you know you're capable of being. When discipline becomes part of who you are, the internal struggle quiets. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop waiting for the right mood. You stop burning energy on decisions that were already made. You simply act, not with force, with alignment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was here to do the work of a human being. Not to seek comfort, not to be admired, but to live according to reason and virtue. That same choice is available to you right now, in ordinary moments, through ordinary actions done consistently. So don't aim to feel motivated tomorrow. Aim to be someone who follows through. Let discipline be calm. Let it be simple. Let it be yours. And if there's one line to carry forward, let it be this: I don't force discipline, I live in alignment with it. If this message helped you, take one step today, not a big one, a real one, and come back tomorrow. Not inspired, but committed.